Hey guys, Squatch Reloading here. We're going to get started on this 10mm load series, and like I had indicated in other videos, we're going to start off with some load development on our Redding T7 turret, and we're going to break this down into steps. So in this video, we're going to focus on setting our sizing die up correctly. We're going to talk about cam over, preload, and those kind of things, and what my theory is on the T7. We're going to be using our Redding 40 Smith 10mm die set. This is their titanium carbide set, and then also going to be using one of their premium 40 Smith 10mm expander dies. And I really like this die, and we'll get into that here in a little bit during our sizing. Now, it's not necessary with carbide dies to use any kind of case lubricant. But for me, I like to use Redding Imperial Sizing Die Wax. It doesn't leave a greasy mess, and it really smooths up the operation and provides a consistent sizing. As far as shell holders, I think this is a Redding, this is an RCBS number 27 shell holder that we're going to use here. So that's kind of what we're going to do in this video. So stick around, and we're going to get started with some sizing. Alright guys, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using our number 27 RCBS shell holder, and I'm just going to show you how this works start to finish. But one thing to note on the T7s and all the Redding presses for that matter, they're pretty precision ground, so you got to be kind of aware of these edges here. They could bite you. I've taken a file and just kind of knocked off the hard edges there just to keep myself from getting bit by this ram here. But putting in your shell holder is pretty straightforward, and basically it slides in the groove here on the press, on the ram, and then just give it a good push. And on the Reddings there, that's a very hard, solid snap, and it doesn't rotate a whole lot unless you really turn on it. So once you get it set, it's good to go. And I usually set mine at like the 7 o'clock position or 8 o'clock position, somewhere in there, especially when you have the indexing slide bar system on there, so it does kind of get in the way, but I typically work at that 7 o'clock position. So let's go ahead and get this sizing die set up. So on the T7, it's a 7-slot or 7-hole turret, and it also has 1, 2, and 3 holes here for your turret handle. It doesn't really matter what orientation you have this. I usually just try to keep my turret handle here on the left, because typically I'm working back and forth between 2 dies. And in my opinion, I think that's probably one of the more efficient ways of using the turret. I know a lot of guys will set up, they'll have all 4 of their dies set up, and they'll try to run this like a progressive, 1 round at a time. In my opinion, I think it kind of defeats the purpose of the turret. When I work with the turret, I'm thinking ultra precision, so I'm doing the same step over and over, or 2 steps over and over. So like we'll do a size and then expand, size and expand, and then I'll fill my shell plate, and I find that I'm most efficient that way, and I keep a level of precision that I'm looking for. So to set up our sizing die, in our case this is going to be a sizing and decapping die, as you can see there. All of my brass I already have pre-decapped, but I always leave this in there in case I miss one. So we're just going to get this started. We're going to just put a couple threads in the die here, and then we're going to raise the ram all the way to the top of the stroke. And what we're going to do is we're going to snug up this die all the way down until we bottom out on the shell plate. Now, on my T7s, what I do is, it's not a cam over, what I call it is a preload. So what I'm wanting to do is I want to take the slop out of the linkage that's in the press, and then I'm going to show you the back side of the press and as to why I preload. So I make sure that I get the full potential of the precision available with this press. Alright. To preload this press, a couple points that I think that need preloaded are one, the linkage points in the ram and in the stroke. but also in the back here, where your turret head rolls around, there's a detent ball in there, and then the way this press is designed, as you come up on your stroke, the back side of the turret bottoms out, and it's by design this way. That way you get a consistent location every time, and you're eliminating the turret head flex here. So how I preload this press, again, we have the ram all the way to the top, and I've got my die, the base of my die bottomed out on the shell holder. So what I'm doing is I'm going to raise or lower the ram, and I'm going to go about 1/8 of a turn, and then I'm just kind of getting a feel. And yeah, once I can feel that the die is centered up in the threads, and that I have no slop in my handle when I'm wiggling, and I don't feel, I mean, you're not going to feel it up here, but I'm always just kind of checking. So it's not necessarily a cam over per se, because in a cam over design, as you roll across the fulcrum in your stroke, I believe that's the right term, the fulcrum, your ram will actually go down and then back up. Where in this press, it's only going up to the pivot point, and that is it. So again, in your, I guess that's a better term, in your cam over style press, as it pivots, it'll go up and then down and then back up. So this, all I'm doing here is preloading the press, taking out all the slop in the linkages, and putting the turret head at rest on the back of the arm here on the press body. So now let's get back to setting this die up. So now that we have a preload on the press, and we still have our ram to the uppermost position, and I get no movement in my die whatsoever. There is no slop. I've got the threads fully engaged and centered up by preloading the press. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of hand tighten my lock ring here. I'm not going to go crazy on it. I'm just going to hand tight, and then I'm going to take the press and relieve the pressure. And I'm going to go, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my Imperial Sizing Die Wax, and I'm just going to apply. And this doesn't take much, very little. So I'm going to put a cartridge in the shell holder here, and then I'm going to run it up into my die. Make sure I get everything dead and tight, and I'm fully engaged in the die. So at this step, I'm going to go ahead and snug up my die ring with my Sinclair die lock ring tool there. I'm going to snug it up. So I'm going to call that die set up for right now, and then we're going to do some checks and make sure that we're still good here. Alright guys, so what I'm doing is I'm just doing a quick confirmation that there's nothing wrong with our sizing die. I've never found any issues with one, but I always like to be safe, and I double check just roughly dimensionally everything with my calipers. And what I reference is, if you guys can see that there, this is just a page out of the Sierra Load manual, and I really like that manual because I can pull these pages out. But I'm just checking the case overall length, and we should be around a 992, so 0.992, and we're right at 0.9915. And then I'm also just going to check the base, and I'm also looking for that mythical Glock bulge. Always put my eyeballs on it for that. But yeah, we should be like a 425. We're at 422, 421, somewhere in there. So we know that you know, when we size, typically we size a little bit smaller, and that just kind of builds in some neck tension in the bullet and things like that. But so, you know, visually and a couple dimensions there, everything looks good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our Dillon case gauge, and I just you know, drop it in, make sure it falls in nice and easy, make sure everything's flush, and everything looks good. So I'm going to call that die set up. So let's move on to the expander die. Alright guys, I want to show you the premium expander die from Redding, and hopefully I can get this to zoom in here for you. But as you can see, it's kind of golden color, and what that is a titanium nitride coating that Redding puts on the dies, and you know, it does increase surface hardness quite a bit, lubricity, and you know, it's It also, they say, prevents a lot of the brass buildup on the die. Personally, I haven't seen less brass buildup than I have with others, but you know, it does a nice job on the expansion. So to set this die up, we're going to go ahead and take our turret and rotate it one position clockwise, because like I mentioned earlier, I like to work back and forth between two dies, and it seems to work out great as far as, you know, keeping with the precision that I want, and then also building in some efficiency as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to back the expander die out almost all the way out, and we're going to go ahead and begin threading the die down, and we want to try to maintain the same level of preload, getting used to that and how we do it, so we as the reloader setting this up can remain consistent from die to die. And we also want to make sure that we're preloading the machine, because that's where it actually shines and has a lot more precision as it's designed to do. So we're going to go ahead and raise our ram to the top of the stroke, and we're going to thread down the die until it bottoms out on the ram like so. And I'm going to lift it or lower the ram slightly and give it about an 1/8 to 1/4 turn. And two things I'm looking for. One, to make sure that I've got the die centered up in the threads or engaged completely in the threads, and I have no play in the die, no play in any of the linkage. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and tighten down the lock ring, and I'm just going to, you know, hand snug it at this time, and then I'm going to go ahead and drop the ram down, and we're going to work on expansion for our cartridges. I went ahead and sized about 4 here. Hopefully we can get this in 1. But now what we're going to do is we're going to start engaging the cartridge by threading in our expansion plug. So to set up our expander die, again, we have the press preloaded. I've put in a cartridge, and I'm making sure I have my expander portion of the die backed out. I'm going to raise the cartridge up into the die. Again, we're preloaded, and I'm going to start threading down the die until I feel it engage the cartridge, which it already has there. So now it's just trial and error. I'm going to pull the ram down, and I'm going to check with a bullet and see where we are. And typically, yeah, we're not even close. So typically what we're looking for is a flare of around 12 thousandths. I never measure these, and I probably should, but I just kind of work off feel and experience. But we'll see. This is a mistake here. I got to talking, but you can see just getting a little overzealous with the die there. Pretty simple to make a mistake, especially when you're talking. But for giggles, I'm gonna check this here. I'm gonna zero my calipers like so on the cartridge, and I'm going to check how much I actually flared that. Yeah, so, you know, typically we like to see around 12 thousandths, and me talking, getting a little overzealous, we did a whole 27 thousandths there, so we'll resize it probably, who knows. So we'll go ahead and back that out a little bit and try again. So again, I'm just getting a feel for where I want my flare, and you know, for me that actually feels pretty good. So we'll see how close I was to that 12 thousandths. Actually, I was pretty close there. Yeah. Okay, guys, so by my sense of smell and feel here, I'm very comfortable with you know, the flare on this, and we're at 10 thousandths. So I think that's to go 12 thousandths probably wouldn't hurt anything, and yeah, that feels fine. So we're going to call that die set up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to we're going to get a new cartridge. I'm going to put it in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to raise it up in the die, and then we're going to get our lock ring all set and snugged up here. Again, I'm going to grab my Sinclair die lock ring tool, and I'm going to start here with the lock ring on the die, just give it a snug. And then I'm also going to use it and get my expander stem set, and while I'm at it, just double check our sizing die as well. So as of right now, I'm feeling pretty good about these two dies, and let's kind of recap. Okay guys, so we got two dies set up today. We got our sizing die and our expansion die on our Redding T7. Couple things that we need to note is one, that we're consistently preloading the press. We need to develop a technique, or you need to develop a technique, or how you can consistently do that over and over and over and over again. And this press will have lots of precision and lots of accuracy, and it's how it's designed. So with our sizing die, we confirmed, you know, from a dimensional standpoint, that it's within what our expectations are. Our cartridges fit the case gauge, so we're all good there. On our expansion die, we checked it dimensionally. We're around 10 thousandths. Most people like to be in that 12 thousandths ballpark. I like to try to eliminate as much work hardening of the cartridges as I can to try to extend my brass life, specifically on 10 millimeter. But sometimes, you know, on the progressives and things like that, you know, you got to get right up in there in that 12 thousandths range, or maybe even a little bigger, depending on the type of bullet you're using. But what I try to do from my standpoint is limit the amount of work hardening and still do a good insertion, and then, you know, a good crimp. So we have those two dies set up. So in the next video, we're going to cover priming, seating the bullet, powder charges, and all that. And then what my intent is to take this load development that we're going to do here on the Redding and see how that translates over to the Dillon XL750. We're going to test everything, see some chronograph stuff. So stick around if you're into 10 millimeter. Maybe you'll take away something from this. But guys, don't forget to check me out over on Facebook and Instagram at Squatch Reloading. We're on the Reloaders Network, Gunstreamer, Utah Gun Exchange, and of course right here. So until next time, guys, God bless.